The Quran has been preserved, we believe, word for word, letter for letter, haraka or vowel sign for vowel sign.
If it were the case that right now, at this moment, every single mushaf, meaning book or parchment wherein the Quran was inscribed, was to disappear right now, overnight, in every single Muslim community, you will have exactly the same book with exactly the same letters, with exactly the same vowelings emerge and be transcribed and be recited out loud amongst every single Muslim community worldwide. That's special.
The Orientalists are starting to say that there are different versions of the Quran, and they give different examples of variants in the text and change in the meaning.
Exactly the same letters with exactly the same vowelings.
Variants in the text and change in the meaning.
That's special.
Yeah.
It's not something that's been, Muslims have been trying to hide under the rug just in case people, Orientalists or non-Muslims, try to attack us.
Yeah.
Word for word, letter for letter, haraka or vowel sign for vowel sign.
So did the Prophet say it like this and like that?
Absolutely.
And did Allah reveal it like this and like that?
Yes, absolutely.
So they both accepted.
Absolutely.
So let's go through some of these examples. So Malik Yawmuddin is owner of the Day of Judgment. Malik Yawmuddin's king of the Day of Judgment. There's a change in meaning there.
There's an absolute change in meaning. Yeah. It's a rich variety of meaning.
But it's the same book.
Absolutely.
And there's not different versions.
No different versions.
So what about Ya'lamun? They say Ya'lamun and Ta'lamun. Ya'lamun, they know. Ta'lamun, you know.
This is something that happens throughout the Quran as well with different
qira'at.
Ta'lamun, they know. Ya'lamun, Ya'lamun, they know. Ta'lamun, you know. That's something that has no impact on any direct impact on actual
conclusion.
Exactly.
So is there a contradiction if I say they will know and if you will know? Is there a contradiction in that?
Absolutely no contradiction. I mean,
would you ever find a contradiction in these?
Never will you find anything contradictory in terms of the reason.
That's special.
It's kind of like accents.
Absolutely. That's the
kind of like accents. And Allah has allowed the book to be read in different accents.
Exactly.
There's a change in meaning there.
There's an absolute change in meaning.
Variant and change in the meaning. But it's the same book.
Absolutely.
And there's not different versions.
No different versions.
So anyone comes and says there's different versions of the Quran.
That's a ridiculous claim.
Exactly the same letters with exactly the same vowelings.
Talked about some of the variant readings, all of which are, you say, accepted, all of which the Prophet said it like this and he said it like that. Allah said it like this and he said it like that. Because they keep asking the question, so which one is in the preserved tablet? What's the answer to that question?
The preserved tablet is that of the unseen, and we will not be given access to that.
It's amazing. The Muslim Ummah has its fair share of strange ideologies, different sects, different beliefs, different groups. But guess what? All of these groups, no matter what their sect and understanding of Islam is, their Quran is exactly the same. Their Quran is exactly the same. And no group of Muslims around the world believes in another book they call the Quran that is not our book. The Quran shall remain uncorrupted, untouched, and unchallenged until the day of judgment. No one shall be able to tamper with the Quran. No one shall be able to bring a false copy of the Quran and the Muslims will be fooled and say it is a false copy. And therefore, to this day, the Ummah has never disagreed about its holy book. O Muslims, thank Allah for this blessing.
One question, to try and make this as specific as possible, I think. If I were to give you a blank mushaf, and tell you to write what is munazzal verbatim from Allah into that mushaf with no human interference, would you write something which corresponds?
It's not an easy answer. It's not an easy yes or no. It is enough for the Muslim to believe that the
I think
Quran
this should be an easy yes or no, though. Yasir Qadhi. I have to.
Okay, very, very well. So, Muhammad, after we get off this phone call, me and you, let's have a number of discussions. No problem.
And the Quran, there's only one Quran. There are no various versions or whatnot. It's one standard copy of the Quran across the Muslim world. And really, there's not been any variant versions of the Quran. The Quran is the Quran for all sects and schisms and groups of Islam. And we also, all Muslims take pride in the fact there is but one Quran. There's no variance of the Quran.
The crisis that you had was in relation to this question of the relationship between the ahruf and the qira'at, basically.
No. The crisis I had wasn't that. The crisis I had was, well, yeah, wait, that was what generated. But what was the crisis? The crisis was very simple. And by the way, this is now a well-known open secret amongst many Muslim graduate students and academics around the world. And this is well known. Traditional understandings of ahruf and qira'at cannot answer some of these pressing questions that are now being poked by our people outside of, by our academics, by their academics outside of the faith tradition. You see, in a Muslim environment, there's always some respect that we have for the Quran. We should. In a Muslim environment, we'll press a little bit and then we'll say, okay, khalas, sami'na wa ata'na. And that's great, alhamdulillah. When you go to academia, they don't have that red line. And they're going to just, you know, the famous story of the emperor with no clothes. They're going to just point out, no, that doesn't make any sense. Well, that's not true, and this and that. And they'll bring issues, which I'm not going to mention explicitly, that you know are true because they're in your own books. They're not inventing anything new. They'll bring you riwayat, and they'll bring you athar, and then you add to that very well-known issues of, I don't even want to be explicit. And then you bring on top of that makhtutat, and then. The most advanced of our scholars, they're not quite fully certain how to solve all of the unanswered questions in there. Ibn al-Jazari, who without a doubt is the greatest scholar of qira'at for the last 1,000 years. Ibn al-Jazari famously writes, I have been thinking and pondering, I've been thinking and pondering about the issue of the ahruf and qira'at for over 35 years. Nayfan wa talatina sana, he said, right? And confused and whatnot, then finally, this is my response. And by the way, even that 7, all later scholars say, well, that doesn't make any sense. So they kind of dismissed even that after 35 years. This is not a joke, brothers and sisters. The issue of ahruf and qira'at caused confusion to somebody whom the Prophet ﷺ said, if you want to listen to the Quran directly, listen to Ubay. Ubay is not some even average Sahabi. He is the Qari of the Quran. He is the master. He is who he is. And he goes, فَدَخَلْ فِي نَفْسِي شَكْ. Like, what is all of this stuff? And the Prophet put his hand, and then he goes, it all went away. Ya akhi, me and you, we don't have that blessing, do we? In the Sahih or the Hasan hadith of Ubay bin Ka'b, the hadith of the ahruf, that when the Prophet mentioned the issue of ahruf, and that there are different ahruf and whatnot, this is in the version of Muslim Imam Ahmad, Ubay bin Ka'b says, authentic hadith, فَدَخَلَ فِي نَفْسِي شَكْ. In my heart, a doubt came that I hadn't had about Islam since the days of Jahiliyyah. The standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm going to say. The standard narrative does not answer some very pressing questions. Okay? This is what I'm going to say. This is no longer hidden news. More and more professors and academics are writing stuff, and it's being publicized on Twitter. In the last 2-3 years, I have had at least, I'd say, 12 people tweet at me like specific articles like, how do you answer this? And, you know, about ulum al-Quran, about qira'at, about makhtutat, about issues, you know. These are now well known within the Western Academy, that they're bringing forth issues. Their level of now knowledge is leaps and bounds above what it used to be, you know, 100 years ago. Our ulama in the Eastern world are not aware, by and large, of what's going on in the Western side of things. And they're not answering those questions in a manner that it needs to be answered. This issue of ahruf and qira'at has troubled the ummah from the very beginning of times, nothing new. And there are 15 opinions about this. None of them fully answer all of the questions that are raised. Some of them answer more than others. So the issues of the relationship, of the origins, of the ikhtilaf and all of this should only be discussed amongst those who are familiar with this science. I never brought this topic up myself. You will not find one lecture of mine about this issue. It should never be brought up in public. And I don't like these idiots, and they are idiots, wallahi, because they're the ones who caused this. In this issue, they're utter idiots who did something haram. And I don't like saying this. This is not something you discuss amongst the masses, ya akhi. It's not wise. You don't understand qira'at, let it be. It's wise. That's why I never did it. And that's why even when they accused me, I didn't defend myself, because I would rather people have doubt about me than the Quran. What is happening in the last few years is not me anymore. It's the Western academics. These problems are now becoming mainstream. Twitter has so many accounts of Quran experts, and they're non-Muslims, and they're just saying things. There are books written. Yani Brill released a book by Shadi Nasser. Again, yani read that book as well. And it's for those that are interested in stuff, and you'll understand that, hey, we need ulama who believe in the Quran to defend the Quran.
If I were to give you a blank mushaf, yeah, and tell you to write what is munazzal verbatim from Allah into that mushaf with no human interference, would you write something which corresponds?
It's not an easy answer. It's not an easy yes or no. It is enough for the Muslim to believe that the
I think
Quran
this should
is
be an easy yes or no, though. Yasir Qadhi. I have to.
Okay, very, very well. So, yeah, Muhammad, after we get off this phone call, me and you, let's have a number of discussions. No problem. All of the qira'at are the Quran. All of the qira'at are authentic. Alhamdulillah. Leave it at that, ya akhi. Beyond this, honestly, I have no problem. We'll have discussions or take my class.
I think this should be an easy yes or no, though. Yasir Qadhi.